Python, my code. So it printed begin, which is at the top, and then it created places, but it has opened the file to append. But now we have all of them in a nice one script. And I want to go into Python. So before going to Python, I want to check which Python that I'm using. So I'm using Python that's installed on the Anaconda 3. So you may have different one, you may have Python from Eris, but I'm going to use this Python. And before going to just Python, let's go into IPython. So it's going to return you a shell, very similar to Python shell, but you have nice coloring on this, so it's slightly easier to use. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to work with database. So for me, it took me ages to understand what database is. I didn't know why we need database, but you can think of database as just an Excel file. So why do we need Excel file? To save data. And to save data in a format that we can retrieve later with ease and with simple methods. And we're going to do that in Python today. So let's follow me with open and then string, and then give a path of a text file that you want to write. I want to write a text file called test.csv, and then I'm going to read it as write mode. So this is telling you the mode of it. And I'm going to load it as a variable called fp. If you don't like fp, you can call it text file, something else, but I just want to call it fp because that's what many other people use. So this is just telling you, oh, open a file, whatever file you name them, and then you are going to write on it. All right, I'm going to do fp dot write, and then close parentheses. Write whatever you want to write. And then I'm going to press enter. Nothing happens because I didn't print anything. But if you do ls, you will see a test.csv file, which you can cat. Well, by the way, cat is a shell command, as we all know, but you can still use that in IPython, which is quite handy. Test.csv. So it has my string that I just entered and I've written into a text file. Okay, this time I want to load them with open the same CSV file that I wrote, test.csv. This time I'm going to read them, read as fp, and then I'm going to call them text equals fp, this time read. So I'm opening it as a read mode and then name them as fp, and I'm just reading them into a variable called text. All right, let me see what text is. All right, the text that we wrote there. Okay, now let's go back to the list and the for loop that we did yesterday. So now I'm going to give more than one name. I'm going to do Boston, LA, New York, and then I'm going to set them as places. So now this is a list. I want to do the same thing here. I want to open a file. I want to just write the location. All right, let me do that. Let me define the places first. I'm looping through place in places or place in places. All right. You know this, and with open test.csv, I want to overwrite on this, and then I'm writing W here. Just remember, I'm writing W. I'm writing something as fp, same line, fp, write. Now I'm not gonna write haha. I'm gonna write place. So in the first loop, it's gonna write Boston. Second loop is gonna write LA. Third loop is gonna write NY. Let's see. Typo. My bad. Place. Nothing happens as before. Let's cat them. Test.csv. What do you expect? I probably expect 3 of them in different lines, but it doesn't work like that. It only has ny because the W is actually loading it to write it over. It's not append. It's writing them over and over. So in the first loop, you wrote Boston in them, but it's not there because it's overwritten by LA and New York in the loops next. So let's just change them by A, see if it appends. So it worked. A for append rather than writing. Test, what do you expect? There's a ny in the beginning because there was a ny in the existing text file already. So ny, you can forget about that. And then Boston and LA and ny. Okay, it worked. In a loop, now we can save something in a file, but it looks ugly. So let's clean them up. Let's go back again. Now, after each loop, I want to write line break. Remember, it's still append mode, so it will append something to here. See, let's cat them again. So this already existed. We appended Boston and then line break, LA, line break. So it's looking better. Let's remove test CSV now to see if I can save it in a clean version. Test.csv now is getting cleaner. Okay, now we can write file in different names in a loop. We should be able to load them into a list. All right, let's try them. Let's open them with open test.csv, the same file that we wrote. This time we're going to read them in. Let's read them in as fp, and then text equal fp.read. Let's see what we have in text. What do you expect to have? Here we have Boston /n that represent line break here, and LA, and then /n, another line break here, and Y, another line break at the end. And now we want it as a list, not as a single text, because Boston, LA, we want them places. I want to call them places new, and I want to split this text by the line break. Then I can says new, get the items, the nice items in a list. But remember, there's this weird character at the end, is because there was another line break and it got the empty space at the end. All right, there's a way to remove this. You repeat this so you don't have to remember this, but you can strip all the empty places from the text before we do anything. When you look at the text, there's no empty spaces at the end, so now you can get it as a places new. Then your places new do not have the empty thing at the end, okay? But right now, look at my history. If you type history, your history is already confusing. Do you know what I mean? It's already getting confusing to use a shell to write your code. This is about time that you need text editor like gedit or Vim or PyCharm or something like this, so you can have a record and edit them faster and quicker. All right, that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but now we're going to write a code. So I'm going to exit out of it. I'm going to open a new terminal on the right. On my right, I'm going to open VI and I'm going to write a script. VI, and I want to call my underscore code dot py. .py extension represents a Python code, and it allows your Vim to know that it's a Python. So I'm inside Vim now. I'm going to write the same thing. So here, let me just copy this. Let's get places. I want to make it more complex. Anyway, Austin, quick line. I added a few more places, and then I had a line where I was writing them and appending them, and then as a place, then I want to add a line break here. And what did I do? I loaded them, right? I loaded them with a strip here, and then I splitted them into places underscore new text. Split line break. Let's call this something else. Let's call them txt. Okay, so I'm gonna save them. I'm sure everyone knows this. Save is :W. If you do :W, you can save a file. If you do ls on the screen on your left, you will see my underscore code. Now let's run this. Let's run Python. Oh, we have to print something. Let me print places new, and maybe at the top I'm gonna print begin, and at the end I'm gonna say complete. All right, I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna run this by Python. It's always good practice to check which Python you're using now, which Python. So I'm going to use this my Anaconda Python to run the code on the right. Python, my code. So it printed begin, which is at the top, and then it created places, but didn't show because we didn't say what to do with it. It has opened the file to append, which was the same thing that we did in the show. But now we have all of them in a nice one script. So you're collecting your history of doing anything to the data or doing anything to the database. So imagine a situation you process HTTP EP data, which is quite important in our lab for the scientific papers and research. But say you do that in a shell and you lose all the histories, that will be quite bad for the next RAs, other people who's working on the code. They were not able to find out what you've done to the data. So it is vital to collect your code, even if it's a shell. If it's Python, yes. If it's shell, yes. R, of course, have to collect every history of the things that you do by placing them in a code like this. So this is just an example. but it will not only make your history available, but now you can write your things much faster, and you know them. So what should I do? You can change, if you want to change Brookline, and change this like straight away. You can move around, change variables into haha, and repeat the same thing. Now you can mix your Vim skills on the Python skills or shell skills together. And later you've been moving around to the shell to get different outputs from the shell and then put it into your code like this. So this is eventually why we are learning Vim. All right. So we now can write a place and we can fill that with the information from a list. And we can load that information filled file into Python, into a text file, and then we can split them into different items. So this is what Simone and Oma have been working on. So we have influx of data from different sites around the world. And each of the new cases have IDs, and each of cases have a new folder. So Simone is working on to grab new folders every hour and then put them into a database. And then if it exists in the database, that means the script already seen the subject before, so it's not a new subject. But if it doesn't exist in the database, it's going to print it. It's going to do something. It's going to send what to do to Omar's function. So that's basically what we are doing. And we can just finish our thing here by doing that. So imagine we didn't do this. So we are just loading a database. So let me print our database. Let me name them properly. Let's keep the test, but I'm gonna call them text. Call them text, subject, ID, list, and I'm gonna print subject, ID, list. I'm gonna save them and I'm gonna run them here. So just imagine a subject has ID of Boston, another subject had ID of LA, another NY, and so on. So now I'm going to loop through each of the subject. Well, we have to loop first. Loop for subject in subject ID list. If this subject has ID of New York, then I want to print, oh, this is New York. If not, else, colon, I want to print, this is not New York. Okay, look at the indentation. So we indented everything below loop, meaning that we're gonna do this steps for every subject. And notice there's indentation here on the condition. So if this is something, we're gonna do everything that is indented after it. And if it's not the case of here, then you're gonna do everything that is indented below here. We're gonna get that. Is it perfectly fine if you don't get that? I'm gonna run it. Just imagine what you're gonna get. So first subject will be Boston. It's not New York. It's gonna print this is not New York. Second LA. This is not New York. This is New York. So oh, this is New York. That's what I'm expecting. Let's do this. Okay, this is not New York, this is not New York, oh, this is New York. So given the condition that you give, the function or the script will respond to your condition. And we can also include, this is not New York, but we learned this formatting, but subject. So this time it will say, oh, this is not New York, but Boston, but LA. Okay, you can take a step further. Say this is New York. I want to save them. I want to save this ID of this subject in a different file. Then you add new thing here. With open, you can write test underscore New York text, write or append. That's FP, and you write something. This is ID of New York. Let me just run this. Just imagine what's gonna do. Output's the same, but when I do ls, you have test underscore New York.text got created under the condition of New York. When the subject is New York, you're gonna write something to this text file, appending every time. Let me get them here. This is ID of New York. This is ID of New York because we had two NYs. Okay, so using the code on the right or slightly changing it, I think many of you actually can help what Simone is doing. So Simone is comparing her database to the new file. If it's not in the file, this is new subject, send it to Omar. If it's in the file, do nothing. This is what we are doing, but by using that, we can create quite complex script first. I'm now going through Vim and Python, but let me ask you again. So if you really want to learn Python, take a role in any scripting project in the lab. That way you can learn much faster. Look at Omar and look at Simone's code. They're getting really good. So get a project. If you can't find a project, you can always let me know. I can find your project. I can make a project for you so we can use something and make you learn something. But it's a good practice for you to make a script, leave a record for others, and for the better addition abilities. And now we can write into this database and we can load from database. We can do something based on the conditions now. And then we learned a few Vim things. And next, well, we just did really basic if statement, but we will get to a little more complex. What if something, do this, if not something, do this. That's the simplest form, but we can make it more complex. If this, do this. If this, do that. If this, do that. We can make a lot of more conditions, so we can control the data more. That's what we will do. Let me quickly recap what we've done in the Vim as well. So in the Vim, this is the note that I'm using. We went through the core steps in the beginning, but let me highlight this again. This is the core step. So JK, HR, please, this is only thing that I ask you. Replace your arrows into this. You're already good. And today we did splitting the screen by split, V-split, move around with Control W, and then we can open a tab new, another tab. We can jump around different tabs, and we can map your escape key into double J now. And then you could copy between different scripts. And now you can insert, append, insert in the beginning of the code, insert at the back of the code. So you can now edit or write something into the code. No, in Python, you don't need end because you use literally indentation of saying, defining the blocks that you will run. Since these are indented, once everything done is done for the indented block, that's equivalent to the end. So you don't have to define when your function ends. So for example, in other languages, you have to highlight when your function starts, when your function ends, like this begin or end. But look at this. We know when it starts because it's indented. So we know when it ends because it's indented. All right, this is a block of code that is already indented. Then it knows which is begin, which is end, which is quite comfortable. Cool. Thank you. Please pick one. Please pick one. I'll pick V-split and use that this week. And if you don't have any questions, I'll see you next time.